Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is a show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you have better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at Twit TV.
This is Twit.
The big story, I think one of the big stories, and maybe one of the more exciting stories of the year, was the AI revolution.
Yes,
this all kind of happened towards the end of the year. I was looking, and in April we had the story about DALL-E can edit pictures, and then they open it up to the public, and then along comes open source Stable Diffusion, and it's amazing. And because it's open source, the development is very aggressive, very fast. Then Midjourney. And then, of course, ChatGPT, which just was open to the public by OpenAI a couple of weeks ago. And what it looks like is almost a Cambrian explosion of artificial intelligence, that perhaps we are at the hockey stick. Is that overambitious, do you think?
No. Have you heard is it Holly, the Jolene cover by that artist that's completely AI generated? Is incredible.
No. So this is actually the question somebody was asking this week is, where is the music version of this?
Oh, no, it's out. You look this up. The Jolene, there's an AI that re-recorded Jolene by Dolly Parton, but in the voice of an artist.
Should I play it? Can I get in trouble?
It's fantastic.
Here's a picture of Holly
Plus, I'm sorry.
Plus. All right, I will.
By the way, the video is
little,
not great, but the music is fantastic.
Well, as often with AI generated, it's kind of like an image out of your nightmares, isn't it? Sometimes.
The video
it's the.
All right, well, close your eyes, everybody, while I play this, unless you're driving. So this is all generated by AI,
right?
Even the music.
Oh, especially the music.
But I mean, not just the vocals.
Oh, actually.
Is it real music
I'm
and
not
then
sure about
fake
the music.
vocals?
The vocals are AI.
Ryan Norris, who handles the instrumentation.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think there was a guy playing the guitar, but
is this hard?
The voice is not hard. I mean, we've heard it before, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. This is.
No, that's not such a big deal to me.
Yeah, no, I wanted to make up entirely.
I love that we are at the point where we're not impressed by it.
Ha!
That's not worth.
See, that's your AI.
That's fine. Okay, that's
I'm
fine.
trying to find it right now.
I mean, maybe if the Robot Army was coming.
When we have heard AI music, it has been the uncanny. What is that? Oh, that's your AI, Steve.
That's Lenza.
Lenza's very cool.
Very good.
Yeah.
Lenza has a little bit of a problem, though.
I noticed your Lenza thing doesn't have a lot of cleavage, though.
Yeah, can we?
What?
I can't
Why would
show.
that be?
I really can't show Lisa's AI because now they fixed it, I think. But initially, so I did mine first, and like yours, Steve, it looked like me. It wasn't sexy. This is Kim Schaffer, who works on the radio show. She's a call screener. Not, it's cute. It's not bad. And mine are fine. There are a few kind of sexy ones where I'm like this one in fur.
There's your Trump NFT, yeah.
Yeah, but
I'll spend $99 for that.
There's some. I mean, I didn't. This is
what is
not
that.
That's
Why
not
do you
me.
have your shirt off?
That's
so
not
much?
me. Well, I don't. There were no. But okay. But let me tell you. Yeah, for some reason, it decided to take my shirt off. But I can't.
I love that
show
this is
you.
where it goes. Is this like AI by 13-year-old boys?
Is that what it looks like for real?
I can't. Yeah, that's I have got the 8-pack, absolutely. But I can't
Lisa's
show
laughing
you
hard.
the ones that made of Lisa. This is Lenza also, which is an app from the Prisma guys.
It's horny teenage boys run the world.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting is it doesn't do that with men. And it does ask you, are you a man or a woman or other? And then, but I noticed with
even
a woman,
with women, there's a reporter who wrote about this and said, I told it I was a man, and it still created these cleavage in kind of voluptuous pictures or whatever.
I think the pictures of the male are fine, except for the few topless ones. I can't go too far down this road. You can show a couple of these, right, Lisa? These are all right. She's apparently got a boob job, and then it gets worse from there. I did not upload pictures with cleavage. I did not upload suggestive pictures. It was all just headshots. And for the most part, the headshots are fine. But there was a sexist element. Now, it turns out, Anthony, who is running the board today, thank you, Anthony Nielsen, told me that there is a switch. He's our Stable Diffusion local expert. There's a switch that says no NSFW images. And I think what happened is Lenza, which uses server-side Stable Diffusion, which is one of the...
And wants to increase sales.
And yeah, well, initially they forgot to turn that off. So the pictures I generated of Lisa were last Thursday, a week ago exactly. The pictures I did of Kim were from Saturday. I was testing it to see, well, is it going to do that again? And it didn't. And so obviously they said, oops, we didn't flip that switch. Maybe we oughta. Meanwhile, I'm saving these pictures of Lisa for later.
For scientific purposes.
Scientific purposes, I assure you.
I stuck this in the chat. There's a piece by Kevin Roos in the New York Times that has I think it's brilliant, the instructions for removing a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR in the style of the King James Bible.
It was quite good. It was quite
really
good.
Brilliant.
Should I do a little performance?
Yeah,
of
do it. In your voice, it'd be great.
Which accent are you going to do, Leo?
Well, it's Bible, so I'll do the accent of God.
Actually, one of your pictures look like God. You should bring that up too.
Oh, and then we'd really have it. Where does he doesn't, does he link in this article?
You have to scroll down. It's in a tweet. It's one of the visuals.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can. Tweets. What are those? Is that something?
Thomas Patchik,
is that something?
It's from the past.
It a bird?
It's about halfway down the article, and it's a long
like a
tweet.
lithograph.
A guy says, I simply cannot be cynical about a technology that can accomplish this.
Here we go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The prompt was write a biblical verse in the style of the King James Bible, explaining how to remove a peanut butter sandwich from a VCR. And
As one does.
As one does. And it came to pass that a man was troubled by a peanut butter sandwich, for it had been placed within his VCR, and he knew not how to remove it. And he cried out to the Lord, saying, "Oh, Lord, how can I remove this sandwich from my VCR? For it is stuck fast and will not budge." And the Lord spoke unto him, saying, "Fear not, my child, for I shall guide thy hand and show thee the way." Is this sacrilegious? Am I going to get?
That's perfect.
Am I going to hell?
Christmas? Why not?
Take thy butter
like,
knife. It is Christmas.
Like Bela Lugosi from The Grinch.
Take thy butter knife,
right?
and carefully insert it between the sandwich and the VCR, and gently pry them apart. And with patience and perseverance, the sandwich shall be removed, and thy VCR will be saved. And the man did as the Lord commanded. And lo and behold, the sandwich was removed from the VCR, and the man was saved. And the Lord said unto him, "Verily, I say unto thee, seek not to put thy peanut butter sandwiches in thy VCR, for it is not a suitable place for such things. Rather, keep thy sandwiches in thy refrigerator, or on thine plate, where they belong." And the man heeded the Lord's words, and from that day forth he kept his sandwiches in their proper place, and was saved from trouble and woe. Amen. You know what? Okay. Thank you. That's me.
Astonishing.
That's the one. There we go. He's generating pictures of me. In real time,
rewrite
by
my
the
book
way.
in that language.
That's real time?
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm impressed that you're doing this as we do the show.
I'm remoting into my work PC.
Wow.
So it's out the Mac.
Look at that. That's his. What was the prompt?
The
Leo
shot
is a
from,
god.
Leo is
a
a
shot
god.
from Foundation.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I am a wrathful Lord. I think there's a sense of humor in this that is quite impressive. But is it really a sense of humor or no?
Well, as long as you do irony, you're going to get some
I
humor.
was going to say, it might be irony. It might be the closest.
This is
I think it
why
was
this year.
Gebru's piece.
Yeah, well, let me just quote Blake Lemoine, the Google engineer who got fired,
geez.
because he said
well he should
Google's
have.
Lambda AI had become sentient.
Yeah, that's also this year, yes.
But you could actually, reading that, think, well, boy, this ChatGPT really kind of understands irony.
No, I think it's that one attribute it's gained this year is the ability to understand humor better, to identify humor, which is not hard to imagine, right? It's Jerry Seinfeld is all about the architecture of a joke,
right?
And if you really understand the architecture of humor, you can do it. So there's an architecture to irony. There's an architecture to a joke. And I think it's not surprising then that GPT can get that.
That's got to scare a lot of comics and humor writers, however.
Who it really scares is professors. Yeah. Constantly, every day I see academics on, how are we going to assign essays? How are they going to learn to write? Then other people come back and say, well, you fools, this is just the future. I think I've got to start teaching prompt writing.
It would be it would be the equivalent of teaching somebody the Palmer method for handwriting in the computer age, right? It's not. Yeah. It's a skill unneeded these days. Is that true? Certainly for generic.
It's the new programming. It's the new coding.
Impressed you know the Palmer method. Wow, that's.
I told you it's the old man show, Doc.
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother learned that, and she died at 108 in 1990. So that's
yikes.
There's a story. I've told this story before, but at one point, because when we learned the more modern cursive. I doubt. Do you think kids learn cursive?
They don't even teach cursive.
I know they don't. No. They don't teach cursive.
They don't teach addition.
Yeah. Well, that's another matter for another day. But we learned what was considered a more modern. I'm trying to remember the name of the cursive that we learned, but it's ugly, kind of. The one with the V with a little hitch and.
Oh yeah,
and
it's cursed.
It's halfway to calligraphy.
Cursive.
Yeah, it's not though. That's the problem. It's dumbed down.
Yeah.
So at one point when I got into a little thing over fountain pens, I went out and I bought. You can buy it on Amazon. Let me see if I can find the listing for it. You can buy
it's a nightmare.
The old chap books for teaching handwriting, but not from my era, but from your grandmother's era.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Palmer. It was actually a simplified Palmer.
Maybe this will make a comeback, like LPs and
it is very twee,
where it had different ruling lines, right?
Yeah.
Different heights of lines.
Yeah, it's actually does look like calligraphy. It's quite beautiful, quite much more beautiful than the current method of handwriting. Anyway,
but you can do it with a normal pen, like a ballpoint pen or whatever.
It's better to do it with a fountain pen because you want strokes.
The strokes. Okay.
You want the thickness of stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, that's a weird. From AI to
and
the Palmer
method
that
we love.
Let me see if I can just now I've this modern cursive. All I'm getting. So I looked for modern cursive styles and stuff. All I'm getting is fonts.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to write something. So where do we think? So again, I'll ask the question: it's clearly not sentient, but it's also very good.
Except with facts. It's predicting the next word in a way that's going to sound right to us, and it's excellent at that. What is its downfall is that and people think it's going to replace Google. No, it's not, because it's terrible at facts. It delivers wrong answers.
Yeah.
Well said. Now there's use for that.
This might be the right technology for this era.
So
honestly,
it is like a professor.
I know. It's we talked about this, I think, on yesterday on Floss Weekly, that there's one case where it delivered beautiful programming, but it was full of wrongness.
It can write code. It can write code. Yeah, people were using for the first few days of the advent of code, it was writing the solution. So you could actually, in fact, a few people got on the leaderboard within 10 seconds of the release of the advent of code problem.
Oh, really?
They got on the leaderboard having ChatGPT do it. But it couldn't go past day 3. As soon as it got complicated, it kind of failed. On the other hand, and you probably mentioned this, Doc, but GitHub's Copilot does a pretty good job of writing code. There is a problem with it because it seems to have scraped it all from.
Yeah, I was going to say it's sourcing its knowledge from the web. It's not built in. It's literally copy and paste.
But programmers for years, and you're a programmer, Paul, and so are you, Steve. Programmers for years have cribbed from,
that's all we do. Isn't that all programming?
Yeah. So Copilot is just a better way of doing that.
One of the things that I think ChatGPT can do is be very useful for brainstorming. Alex Lindsay was talking about this on Tuesday, where you ask it something and it, spits something out, which doesn't have to be correct in detail, but it can be an entirely different way of thinking about something than you were.
So you kind of use it as an outline?
Yes. Well, just sort of as a friend.
As an aid.
You know what it does really well? It writes documentation really well. So you can ask it, for instance, somebody posted and it was quite accurate. I don't understand aperture in photography. Could you explain what f-stops are and what aperture is and why it's important? And you can say something like, explain to me like I'm a fifth grader or something. But it does a very good job. I think for documentation, because it has access to all that material.
If it has access to the facts. I had an argument with ChatGPT about...
right there! That's the Turing test. It passed the Turing test.
I know. My wife got a new MacBook Pro Air, right? And it has the MagSafe 3 connector, because there have now been 3 incompatible MagSafe connectors.
Yeah.
So I asked, because I couldn't find one on Amazon, I wanted a MagSafe 2 to 3 converter. And it says there is no MagSafe 3. I said, well, there is. And no, everything made by Apple now uses a USB.
If this thing is sentient, it will realize it's losing the fight, and it will just make fun of you.
Well, here's how it lost the fight. It said,
like Twitter.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything since April of 2021.
Yeah, that's why.
It says, I was trained on through April of 2021. I don't know anything new.
It's interesting, though, that it sensed, I see what the problem is. Something has happened since my training ended. Now, that's completely artificial. A modern
But it feels like self-awareness, doesn't it?
Always learning.
It's a failure light that went off. Right. But it's still... But it argued with me before. It said, no, you're wrong. It's
yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sam Altman said it costs a lot of money, about 10 times a Google query per ChatGPT prompt, an eye-watering amount of money. So at some point, this is going to go back underwater. It uses a lot of energy, a lot of compute power. But presumably, you could have a ChatGPT that is always scanning for more information, getting smarter and smarter. It would know about Mag 3.
Once upon a time,
you need a good scrape.
computers.
You need a constantly updated scrape, right? That's gonna feed
it's expensive.
Yeah, but the other thing that interests me is that I think we're redefining literacy in this time. Literacy used to be to write essays, to write full thoughts. Literacy got redefined with new alphabets like emoji and with new media like memes and short video and podcasts. And then now you can get the aid of something that helps you write and say, yes, that was what I was trying to say. Thank you. And so you're expressing yourself better as a result.
This happened 20 years ago with research. It used to be you had to know how to use a card catalog, go in a library, find something. Now all you have to do is know how to ask Google.
Right. So it's query writing. It's prompt writing.
As you're talking, I mean, there's an accessibility angle to this that's actually really interesting, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, tell me about that.
Also,
Paul.
Well, no, I mean, as he was talking, there are people who can't express themselves because of a disability of whatever kind. So, in other words, yes, you helped me say what I was trying to. That's exactly what I meant. Is something that you don't have to have a disability, but anybody could probably use that help at one point or another.
Well, and Steve Jobs famously called a personal computer a bicycle for your mind, which allowed you to do much more. And also remember that the original portable computers we called luggables, and now we have them in our pocket. So
and not merely in our pocket, millions of times faster.
Yes,
and always connected to the internet at a high speed,
and able to do AI locally.
And Apple will have the ChatGPT chip in the next phone.
That'll be the next
This will just be part of it.
Well, I can tell you right now, for instance, you were using Lensa, Steve, but you can actually download and run Stable Diffusion on a modern iPhone, and it runs fast as it does on a PC. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a breakthrough.
You said modern iPhone because you knew that I had a 6 sitting here.
That one, it won't work.
Is that running Windows 2000?
You don't have an iPhone? Come on, you have an iPhone 14, Steve.
I have a 10. I have an X.
All right, well, you might want to get a 14.
Here's the other piece, Leo, is that what this does for the businesses we're in is that it makes content absolutely and finally a commodity. There is the idea of scarce content, the idea of scarce writing, the idea of scarce media is completely gone now, because a machine can generate unlimited amounts of it that makes sense to human beings. And that says the value is not in making a commodity called content. Watch out. That's been the case since Gutenberg. But it changes to where the value is in things like relationships, right? So Elon Musk thinks that Twitter is about content. It's not. It's about the connections that people have.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Tech 907, AI Year in Review. All right. Well, so this is something we're going to circle around to on a few times. This is some kind of new literacy. It could change our relationship to computers quite a bit. It's going to take a while for us to learn how to interact with this stuff, not in necessarily just being able to use it, but understanding its limitations and forming a greater context for the things it tells you, because it's optimized for making things that sound reasonable, not in making things that are true. It can write essays on topics it knows nothing about by following kind of the suggested patterns from all the human written text that it ingested as part of its training process. And this is, again, as I like to say, I think the key thing to remember here is that this is statistics. This is not someone programming all this data into it. It's just dumping a lot of data into it and having it form connections based on these symbols. And as they say, the map is not the territory. You can construct linguistically correct words that are utter nonsense. Early in the morning, in the middle of the night, two dead men began to fight. Yeah, just these contradictions that it doesn't notice. And if you're not familiar with the topic being discussed, you won't notice. So if you're asking an AI, a chat GPT, about a subject that you're not familiar with, you won't really understand where it's falling down. So as they said a generation before with Wikipedia, it's a starting point. You could start something, it gives you kind of a form, and then basically you start fact-checking what the computer told you and seeing if it's remotely reasonable. And where it isn't, you tweak it. But you can't trust it at first blush. And that takes away one of the cues that we have for if something's nonsense. If it's the capitalization is all wrong, if the spellings are incorrect, if the grammar is all messed up, you say, okay, whoever wrote this, they didn't know what they were talking about. But, when you have something where it can, tell you how to take a peanut butter sandwich out of a VCR in the linguistic style of the Bible, it's just like, okay, well, anything it can do that, it can do things that sound reasonable that aren't. I mean, just the absurdity of that is kind of the proof of what I'm talking about. This is nonsense is fine with ChatGPT. And then there's the image version of things too, where, it's kind of garbage in, garbage out to a certain degree, as they spoke about, over-sexualizing the photos of women. It's like, okay, well, guess what it got fed? And, guess what it put out? You can do additional training and say, in the style of certain artist. And maybe if that artist wasn't boob crazy, then it's not going to be quite so prominent. But, just in general, it's like it's commentary on the body of work that it was fed into. And it's interesting, this limitation, as they said with the connector, it's, they have a certain cutoff point. It's like, okay, this is the time frame that we loaded into the computer, and after that, nothing. So the computer does not pass time for that. And, maybe they add some specific instructions, say, hey, if it keeps asking about something current, then give them a message about how your training data only goes to a certain point. That sounds like a human added point. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how a fact like that was communicated to ChatGPT in a way that it would act on. It wasn't just like, guessing that was the case from what it was looking at. It's just like, well, someone told it to do that thing specifically. And that's an interesting aspect. Is that effective to try to manually put patches on a system that was trained on a large amount of data, without a lot of implicitly or explicitly designated structure? Maybe it did some degree. That would be another interesting aspect. I think that's part of the secret sauce for a lot of these different AIs is exactly how did you go about the training? And I think the point that comes up several times is when it does do something weird and they ask the people, so why did this AI come up with this? And they can't tell them because this is the mathematical derivation of millions, if not more, points of data that were all given different weights, statistical style, and given to create, an output. And you don't always know the meaning that it will take from a given input. I've given the example of, showing a lot of pictures of sheep and meadow to help it identify sheep, and it turns out what it identified was, when there's a meadow in there, then there's a sheep. Because they didn't say where in the picture the sheep was, just like, this is a picture of sheep. It's like, okay, meadows are sheep is the lesson it learned. Because none of the pictures that were non-sheep had meadows in them. So that was the dominant visual signage that it derived from. And there's just lots of connections that we don't know. It's sort of like, in a more limited way, a system that was designed to analyze purchases said, okay, well, what are the purchases of pregnant people? And then it said, okay, now we've got a way of, when we see this combination of purchases, we will think that person is pregnant, and we're going to send them a mailer, kind of congratulating them on their pregnancy and, suggesting some maternity items. And, this came to someone's house, and their underage daughter was the, who it was targeted at. And, and they're going, why are you saying our daughter's pregnant? You buttheads, kind of thing. And it turned out she was. And I don't know if she even knew. Just like something in the thing she was purchasing, maybe cravings or whatever, it's like, oh, okay, all of a sudden this person's buying a lot of pickles. I don't know. They just said, oh, this person's pregnant. And there's been cases where it was tragically wrong. I don't want to make this stuff sound like magic, but this is a whole new field. And again, it sort of changes our idea of where human creativity, how that is defined, what part of a given project that represents. I think in some ways it's been underrepresented. When we train automated systems based on a human's workflow, that workflow maybe involved some creativity. The computer can copy it, but it didn't come up with that. Like, okay, given these resources and this task, how do you do something? A human figured that out. And that person, they got paid while they were doing their job, and then as soon as automation took over their job, they never got paid again. They didn't get any residual income like other creative acts often generate. And so maybe that's a way of defining it. It's something that a human has to teach a computer before it's able to do it. Well, that's a creative act and should be compensated as a creative act. Not the full amount that you would normally charge if the human did it, because otherwise there's no point in automation. But, it seems to me as you go from job to job and teaching computers how to take over your job, you should get some residual from the field you've been displaced from, because it wouldn't exist without you. And they're just like saying, well, we own the machine, so 100% of the output goes to us. You actually taught the machine something. You get nothing. You get a one-time payment. It's like, and then as soon as you're gone, nothing. And that's not so for the people that own the machines. They don't bring any additional work to the process, but they get paid month after month. So I think a little more of us need that deal. And that will, because people without any money can't buy anything. So, yeah, that's going to put a crimp in a few businesses if people don't start realizing that. And yeah, way back when, Steve Jobs, when the computers first popped up, they called it the bicycle for the mind. And it's a very striking image. A simple machine that amplifies the capabilities of a human. And AI is the next generation of that. It should be an extension of humans and what they teach it, and not simply a way to replace them. I think that's selling everyone short. And again, you're killing the source of your input if you don't compensate for that creative act and, let people starve off that are actually solving your problems and creating new solutions. But it is interesting, the idea that the human element, at least short term, in practical terms, is not so much the content you generate, but the relationships you have. And for a long time, I think people will prefer to get a result, even if it's the same result, from a human rather than a computer. And I think there's a part of us that a little bit resents someone who's sitting back and pushing a button and making their machine do all the work and then expecting the same pay as if it had been done by a human. I think that's perhaps that's going to be something for the masses rather, and we might almost go back to a patronage system, where the rich pay artists to, create, and, they may adopt people. You may have your clans. If we don't, rein in, I think we need to look at things that big picture. It's like, okay, yeah, small picture, this sort of makes sense. This follows the logic we followed in the past. And then big picture, you look at, but the result is you destroy society. So maybe we better rethink how our process works. It sort of reminds me of the gag of, we have all the people, skills, and resources to, save the planet from an asteroid that's going to hit us. But you know what? It's not in our budget this year. So, maybe after the world's been destroyed, we'll come back and look at it again. It's like, no, you won't. So in certain contexts, you can look at the system and say it is kind of nonsense when you look at it big picture. All right, and with that, let's move on to another clip. This is from the good folks at twit.tv. This is This Week in Google 695, talking about Public Domain Day 2030. Yes, you may not have realized this, but copyrights do have a limit. We've been very used to the politicians, extending the copyright every time Mickey Mouse is about to go into public domain. But, we've had a couple of years where new things actually entered into public domain. They're from the very early 1900s, but, they're there nonetheless. So without further ado, This Week in Google 695, Public Domain Day 2023.
This is Twit.
It's Public Domain Day every year on the 1st of January. Duke University, the Center for the Study of Public Domain, tells us what stuff is going into the public domain. January 1st, works from 1927 and earlier, of course, will be open to all. And actually, we're starting to get to the era where there's some really good stuff. Now that, Disney is not extending copyright well into the future.
We have Yes, We Have No Bananas?
Yes, We Have No Bananas. Let's see. To the Lighthouse, that classic Virginia Woolf. Oh, this is the one I'm excited about. Much of Sherlock Holmes anyway.
The last of Sherlock Holmes. The last of it.
The last of it. So yeah. I've been thinking that might be kind of fun to do a reading of all of the works of Sherlock Holmes, since you'll
still get taken down for it. I guarantee.
Will I?
Try it.
You think they're? We'll try it. We'll see. Willa Cather, A.A. Milnes. Now We Are Six, the creator of Winnie the Pooh. Thornton Wilder's The Bridge of San Luis Rey. Ernest Hemingway's Men Without Women. It's the Jeff Jarvis story.
Hey.
William.
Hey.
No. Jeff and Leo story. William. I'm sorry.
Jeez.
Agatha Christie, Edith Wharton.
What did I do to you?
Herman Hesse, Steppenwolf. I love Steppenwolf. But I think
that takes me back to my
psychedelic
hyper serious teen years. Yeah.
I think the English translation probably still is in copyright, because it was probably subsequent to the German publication. Same thing with Kafka's America. Marcel Proust, the final installment of De la Recherche de le Temps Perdu.
Oh, I was hoping you'd say it in French.
Oh oui, très bien.
Nice.
Movies, Metropolis, The Jazz Singer. That was the first talkie. You ain't seen nothing yet. Wings, Academy Award winner. The Lodger, Hitchcock's first movie.
King of Kings with Cecil B. DeMille.
Oh boy, that was an early thing. It's 1927, so these are pretty early movies, right?
Yeah.
Musical compositions. The best things in life are free. Now that's true. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. Putting on the Ritz. We can sing that. Funny Face.
Wait. Howard Johnson? Like, really? Howard Johnson?
Yeah, he did.
Like the Howard Johnson?
I wonder, do you think it is about ice cream? They're famous for 28 flavors. Maybe. Can't Help Lovin' Dat Man and Old Man River from the musical Showboat. That's a different time, folks. Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington. A lot of stuff coming into public domain. You want to hear I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream? Well, it's not public domain yet. Not public domain yet.
No, this Howard Johnson was a song lyricist.
Oh, okay.
Inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1970.
Okay.
Are you going to do you can play my favorite copyright story of the week of the year?
What's that?
I have on the rundown.
What's that?
Well, I want to do a quiz. Aunt Stacy, as the youngins here, do you know Tom Lehrer?
Oh, I love this story.
Negative.
Tom Lehrer.
At the bottom, Leo, I put up 3 direct links to 3 songs, one of which I sang in the 10th grade talent show.
So Lehrer, who was until his retirement a math professor at the University of California, Santa Cruz, just down the road.
I thought it was MIT.
Well, I think he may have been, but he ended up his career at UCSC.
Oh, okay.
Wrote so many great parody songs before Weird Al.
Brilliant.
Before
I did hear. Yeah,
before Alan Sherman, there was in the 50s this guy named Tom Lehrer, and he has put all of his music, including the sheet music, into public domain. He's in his 90s now.
93, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a way of I don't know, of saying here, I'm done. You can have these. I'm sure he'd prefer to sell them.
It's great.
But, he's wonderful.
The most famous is probably Vatican Rag, line 124.
Shall I play that? I'll play a little bit
I think
of
so.
it.
We can now.
We know we can now. He has on his website audio, also lyrics, sheet music for download. He says, get them now because I don't know how long this site will be up. And
so there's often download anything you want.
Yeah. There's often a live version and a studio version. Do you have
I would do the live version.
All right, we'll play the live version.
Another big news story of the year concerned the Ecumenical Council in Rome, known as Vatican II.
This is how old this is.
Among the things they did in an attempt to make the church more commercial was to introduce the vernacular into portions of the Mass to replace Latin and to widen somewhat the range of music permissible in the liturgy. But I feel that if they really want to sell the product in this secular age, what they ought to do is to redo some of the liturgical music in popular song forms. I have a modest example here. It's called the Vatican Rag. First you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and genuflect.
Wow. I actually, one of my favorites is, of course, his, and it's really kind of a tour de force, his periodic table of the elements.
That's amazing.
I'll play a little bit of this. He also has released the Aristotle version of that. So first, this is Tom Lehrer singing the periodic table of the elements to the tune of I Am the Very Model of a Modern Major General.
There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen, and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium, europium, zirconium, lutetium, vanadium, and lanthanum, and osmium, and astatine, and radium, and gold, protactinium, and indium, and gallium, and iodine, and thorium, and thulium, and thallium.
Amazing. He memorized that and does it all. Yeah. But he probably should have done the Aristotle version. It's a little bit easier going back a little bit in history. Let me see if I can find that. It wasn't on the site, was it, John? We had to find it on YouTube. Let me see if I can find the YouTube version.
Well, now you're going to get taken down.
Maybe not. This is Tom Lehrer, the kind of the original, the historic version of this song.
Thank you. You may be interested to know that there is an older, much earlier version of that song, which is due to Aristotle, and which goes like this. There's earth and air and fire and water.
It's a little shorter. You could probably, everybody could memorize that.
Done.
Isn't that
the
great?
New Math,
Oh, so
Werner von Braun, Pollution, great song.
So many great songs.
So that, okay, as a youngin', I will say this reminds me of Yakko from Animaniacs. He had a periodic table song.
He probably was,
it was done.
Just copying Tom Lehrer.
So it's a similar, I'm sure if anyone in the chat is like
I can't play that
fan, I'm sure they're like, oh, yeah.
Oh, Warner Brothers would get us.
Yeah.
They would come after
This is the one that Mr. Jeff Jarvis sang in his 10th grade talent show. Are you ready?
Time was when an American about to go abroad would be warned by his friends or the guidebooks not to drink the water. But times have changed, and now a foreigner coming to this country might be offered the following advice. If you visit American City, you will find it very pretty. Just two things of which you must beware. Don't drink the water and don't breathe the air.
Were you a radical, Jeff, in your youth? Is that...
Oh, yeah. I organized a moratorium march in my high school.
Oh.
Yeah, I was a pure ale. I'm going to brag here. Very rare I do that, I know. In the 8th grade, the girls were told they could not wear pants. And I pushed them to have a protest wearing pants. And they all got called to the auditorium to get sent home. And I called in the ACLU and won.
Wow.
What? You had the ACLU on speed dial when you were in 8th grade? Did we have phones back then?
I went to the phone booth, and my Republican father was not necessarily happy with me. And I had the number, and I picked in a lot of dimes, and I called the ACLU and told them what was happening, and that scared the administration, and the girls could wear their pants.
Baller.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was This Week in Google 695, Public Domain Day. So yeah, this is, we've only had a couple of these because, like I said, up until recently, the pet legislators for Disney would always extend the copyright duration in general. Like, the basis of, to kind of, put my disdain in context here, the copyright is not a natural property. It is something that was invented based in the Constitution and it was something along the lines of, in order to promote the arts and sciences, Congress may grant limited time monopolies to creative works, something along those lines. So limited time used to mean 7 years, and then you could file, and you had to file for it, and then you could file a renewal to get another 7 years, and that was it. After that, your work was in the public domain. The whole purpose of copyright was for a new publisher to be able to profit from works they created, because without that, you could say, okay, well, I've got this new book, and somebody with a bigger distribution system says, cool, I'm going to start printing that and distributing it, and I'll make most of the money off of it. No one will even know that this original person who actually created it even existed. And so they said, well, okay, we're going to put a limit on that and say, for 7 or 14 years, you can make your money, and after that, it's presumed that most of the value of it is exhausted, or that is sufficient motivation to, allow creative works to happen. The thought being, hey, if I can't make any money from it, I'm just not going to do it. Which, if you know artists, is not really how they think. A lot of times, the majority of artists, or I should say a significant percentage of artists, they just can't help themselves. They'll be busking out on the street corner to, for when they're playing music, not because that's the best way they could make a living, but because they need to do that. They need to create songs and they need to play them for people. But, hey, so in any case, I'm down with the, limited duration monopoly. And it's really been twisted into this thing like, okay, it's like after the author is dead and then X number of years after that, copyright still lasts for their family, or more to the point, to the publishers that buy up all their rights. So, and recently, Cory Doctorow kind of described this process of dealing with the poor creative artist by just giving them more rights was like giving your kid more lunch money when it's being stolen by a bully. It's just, okay, it's just more rights to be signed over to the publisher in a, one-sided deal where it's like, hey, we got this whole distribution system. You can't really make money without us, and therefore just sign over all your rights. And recently, that has included indemnifying the publisher for any violations of laws in any country in the world. Like, you have any idea what the implications of your work for in any country in the world are. But that's the deal they give you. They say, well, take it or leave it. That's the only way we're going to publish your stuff, is if you take on unlimited liability for all the stuff that publishers used to take care of and distributors. And so it's just like there's just no limit really to how much the publishers, distributors will, dig into the rights and put undue obligations on, simply because you have to take it. And again, it comes back to the creator's got to create, and if they want to make money from what they've done, a lot of times they had to take the publisher's deal. So I think the UK, they had something called natural rights, which included, after a certain amount of time, that regardless of what agreements you signed, the person, the human being who actually created something, regardless of if they sold their copyright, can claw back their rights, through a legal process. So something like that, it's like, you're not allowed to sell yourself into slavery. There are limits to what you can do in legal contracts before they become illegal. And I hope at some point we start to say, hey, look, you're just, you just can't coerce people that are in a weak bargaining position, right? It's like they have to sign whatever you put in front of them. They pretty much have to sign it. Firstborn child, whatever. Just saying, hey, there's some clauses you just can't put in here. Might be a way to think. And in they mentioned some of the later Sherlock Holmes went into public domain this year. And that was kind of an interesting case because, a lot of Sherlock Holmes had already gone into public domain, the early stories. But even after that, the estate that owned the rights were saying, well, if you do any stories about Sherlock Holmes being emotional or sympathetic, those are still protected because all the original stories that included that change to his character were later stories that were still under copyright. And therefore, that struck me as a stretch, but, hey, just by taking you into court is, 90% of the discouragement from pursuing something. But now it's all out there. So all of Sherlock Holmes is public domain. And even so, they mentioned it's like, hey, maybe I'll just read my own version of a Sherlock Holmes story. And then Jeff Jarvis was saying, no, you'll still get taken down by YouTube. And it's like, why would that be? Well, because YouTube has a content ID system that is completely divorced from copyright law. And they have some content partners. They can submit samples of stuff and claim that those belong to them. And YouTube will take their word for it. They don't have to actually own the stuff. They just have to say they own it. And they're partners and you're not. And therefore, if what you're doing overlaps with what they're doing, even if in cases where, they're the ones that copied it from you, they're the ones with a relationship with YouTube and whatever they say goes. So if they have a copyrighted, if they put into the content ID system, some work with someone reading a Sherlock Holmes story, and the speech-to-text system determines you're reading the same story, and they've claimed it in Content ID, well, okay, YouTube will say, nope, you're doing copyrighted work. You're doing stuff that belongs to someone else, or at least it's been claimed by someone else. May even get a strike against your account towards getting your account canceled, even though there is absolutely no truth in it. I've seen stories where someone who was doing piano lessons on YouTube, and they were using classical pieces performed by themselves that had absolutely no copyright implications. And yet someone had claimed, I think it was Moonlight Sonata, into, Midnight Jam or something like Moonlight Jam or something like that. They just gave it a different name and claimed it was theirs. And they got a strike on her channel, and she said, you know what? Fine, I'm done. I'm not giving away any more free lessons. If I can't play, classical music in my own performance without, getting told that I'm a thief, then, F this, it's just it was kind of the thing. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, even the similar thing happened. Now that was on purpose. There are a lot of trolls out there that, okay, they know how to get this relationship going with YouTube, and then they just start claiming the works of popular videos that are by individuals that don't have lawyers and stuff. And they'll claim it. They'll say, yeah, send me the ad revenue, if you wonder why they would do it. And all of a sudden they're getting all this ad revenue off of other people's channels that where they had absolutely no creative input in it whatsoever. And, that's kind of the problem with copyright at scale. There aren't enough people at YouTube. If you see how many dozens or hundreds of hours of video that are uploaded per minute, it becomes clear, and you figure out, okay, how many employees does YouTube or Google in general even have total? If every single person at Google was sitting around reviewing the copyright status of things, they would still be swamped. Stuff would be coming in faster than they could look at it. So they have to automate it. And this is where the question of AI will come in again, because previously they've had to have kind of dumb systems do this stuff. and they'd say, okay, well, we're going to do this general kind of fingerprint for the music. Good. We'll do, voice to text on the words, and we'll match that against our database of samples. And so they can match things without really understanding what it is they're matching. Kind of, it's like an acoustic version of a hash. You just say, okay, well, during these 5 seconds, what's the dominant frequency? Okay, and what's during these 5 seconds, what is the dominant frequency? And that forms kind of a fingerprint that can be compared quickly against all the rest of the database without actually, looking at the whole audio and people clapping and babies crying and all that stuff that makes the sound different. But, this one dominant frequency thing stays the same. When AI gets more into this, maybe we will have something that it would be similar to if humans were reviewing it, because the system is kind of built on this absurd concept that any meaningful review can even happen at this scale. And to me, the answer would be like, well, don't have it at a scale. If you can't do it properly, just don't do it at that scale. Or don't pretend that it is anything but what it is, which is just a way to ingest massive content from other people and run ads on it. And you don't really care about being fair. You don't care who owns what. You just, okay, whatever we need to do not to get sued. And, we've put up this system and, we needed to do something was done, and therefore the regulators go away. And, it's because the rest of us don't have lobbyists. The big companies are like, yep, the system works for us. We know how to manipulate this. And the rest of us don't really get a vote, or our voice is not heard in that discussion. So maybe that will be something that changes as AI proceeds. But it could actually make things worse. But back to Public Domain Day. So go out there and look at some of that content and realize it's the one thing it is very suitable for is remixing. You change it enough, the automatic systems won't detect any connection to the original material, and humans will understand that it's public domain now and they can't really do anything about it. So that might be the sweet spot. And with that, you've done it again. You spent an hour talking about technology and how having a better understanding of it can lead to better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagement. I hope you'll join us to continue these conversations next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock, for Northwest Tech Show.